Oh, we are saying he was alright. Oh, we are saying.
Let's get talking with the issue of pensions, and we're being joined by the CEO of Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria, Mr. Oguche Aguda. He joins us via Zoom. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Mr. Aguda.
Thank you. Good morning.
We've been on this for quite a while, so you will help us make sense of the situation even more today. I'm sure you saw that video of retired police officers protesting at the complex of the National Assembly. And their grievance is the fact that they've not been paid for several months, including their gratuities, and they're even asking that they be removed from PenOp. From an administrator's point of view, what do you think played out? Why did it get to that point that our officers who served our country had to, come publicly to demand for what is rightfully theirs?
Yeah, so thank you. I think the first thing is we advertise with the police pensioners and with all pensioners, right? But it's to actually put the issues in the right perspective, right? So the pensioners under the contributory pension scheme, right? They get paid their pensions, right? So when people say they haven't received their pensions under the contributory pension scheme, it's not right. So if you see some of the comments that some of them made, they said they get some amounts of money that might not be much, but they get it every month. So we need to dimension the issue. So under the contributory pension scheme, you will get your pensions regularly. You will get your pension on a monthly basis. And most of the complaints are not that they're not getting their pension. So that's one area to look at. So they can now talk about perhaps it's not enough. That's another issue. But I think it's to situate the issues to say that first and foremost, they're getting their pensions regularly. And that is a stark departure from how it was in the past, whereby when it was under the defined benefit scheme, whereby it was the government that was handling the pensions. Sometimes you don't get their pension. You see pensions delayed for many months. So I think, we need to dimension the issues. The other issue is some of the pensioners who perhaps might have retired before 2004 under the previous scheme might not have gotten paid what we call accrued rights, which is the rights that they had whilst they were working under the previous scheme. And it is the government that pays that. So that might have been delayed, and that could have been the issue that caused the issue. But generally, what we say is that if you are under the contributory pension scheme, it's a funded scheme. It is your salary is deducted, and your employer pays a portion. When you retire, that money is consolidated, and you get paid. So for most of them, they are getting paid. I think we need to dimension the issues.
So, Mr. Aguda, is it possible that some of them had not retired before the new Pension Act of 2004 and had been under the defined benefit scheme partly and under the contributory pension scheme partly, and there seems to be some discrepancy there, and they're entitled to some rights on both sides?
Yes, you're very correct. So there are some of them who have retired and they have rights under the previous scheme, and some of those rights have not been paid, right? And because of that, their pensions are little. They are collecting their pensions, but it's little. Some of them, because they are also under the previous scheme, they might not have received because, we cannot pay their pensions under the contributory pension scheme if their rights are not consolidated. There has to be a consolidation. So in their accounts, their contributions are in their accounts. So all of them are under the contributory pension scheme. They will see their accounts. They will see their contributions because the scheme is very transparent. They will see it. What now needs to happen is for the government to pay their previous rights before they can repay their pensions. But I'm aware that even the police pension scheme, when their rights are being delayed, I'm aware that they have sort of a welfare scheme where they pay people until the government pays their rights. So I hope that answers your question or tries to put it in perspective.
Right. So I want to take it to something that has been a major source of concern for Nigerians, and it started off last week, right, with the conversation in FEC around how the pension savings can be tapped into for infrastructure investment and the rest, and naturally that triggers a lot of people because they always imagine their pension as something that should be untouchable. Because I don't want to hear stories after I've retired and you're telling me something is happening. No, this is my hard-earned money. So give us a framework. How does it work? How much can be touched? Essentially, what can it be used for? What happens to the returns? Would I get some appreciation on my pension as well? So I'd like you to give us a framework, because the Minister of Finance had to say, well, there are regulations and all, but you know that people still have that trust deficit.
Yeah, thanks. So we also got a number of phone calls, emails from concerned Nigerians, and I think it's good that people are watching. So what we always advise is, don't engage with your PFA or your pension when you retire. So you get your account statements every month, you get your alerts. So continue to engage, and we are happy that people are engaging. So people said, well, I hope my pension funds are safe. So I think the first thing is we want to assure and reassure the more than 10 million contributors that their pension funds are safe. They are right now. All the licensed pension operators in Nigeria collectively manage about 19.6 trillion in March 2004, right? And those pension funds are invested. And they're actually invested in line with the Pension Reform Act and the investment guidelines issued by the National Pension Commission, PenCom. So those guidelines determine how the pension funds can invest. So as an industry and as pension funds, we are not averse to investing in infrastructure. As a matter of fact, some independent research has said that the pension funds have invested in more than 2 trillion in infrastructure through various means, whether it's bond issued by state governments, which are listed on SEC-regulated exchanges, or bonds issued by the federal government, which are listed on SEC-regulated exchanges, or bonds issued by companies, or infrastructure bonds, or infrastructure funds. So that has happened over the years. What happens is that each of the pension funds, there are about 19 pension funds, each of them has their investment guidelines, and they invest according to their investment guidelines. But it has to be in line with the framework issued by the National Pension Commission. And as pension fund managers, our first responsibility, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the asset owners who are the contributors. And that fiduciary responsibility is to ensure that when they do retire, they have their funds, and we've given them competitive returns. And we've tried to do that over the last number of years. The last 20 years since the CPS came, we've shown that we've been able to grow those assets. As a matter of fact, the actual contributions in pension assets is just about 10 trillion as of March. That is how much people invest. But through the efforts of the pension fund and the investment activities, you can see that it has grown to about 19.6 trillion as of March. Within that period also, over the last 17 years, the industry has paid out about 3 trillion naira to 500,000 individuals, whether it's retirees, whether death benefits, whether it's through people that want to do program withdrawals or annuities. So what happens is that the individual pension funds will make their decisions on how they want to invest based on their individual investment criteria, but based on the investment guidelines that PenCom issues and in line with the Pension Reform Act. So that's the process by which investment goes. And like I said, we have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure safety, to ensure profitability, decent returns, and that when the individuals retire, they do get their funds. And we've been doing that over the last number of years. I don't think it will change.
Let me quickly follow up on that. This has been reoccurring. The last time we had you on the program, you assured that plans by government to access money from pension funds should be nothing to worry about. But the Minister of Finance is speaking yet again, and in reaction to that announcement that the government was planning to unlock 20 trillion naira to fund infrastructure, would not be done illegally. So if he says it won't be done illegally in reaction to the groundswell of opposition to that move, it will be done anyway, even if it will not be done illegally. So what does he mean by it will not be done illegally? And what are the long-term implications of the federal government accessing a whopping 20 trillion naira in the long term on, the account owners of this retirement savings account who would want to access their funds, what are the guarantees that their funds would be safe by the time they're old and they need them?
So I'll speak for the pension funds. I won't speak for the minister. He can't speak for himself. But what I want to say from our own point of view, successive governments, the CPS started in 2004. And since then, we've engaged with successive governments, successive issuers. Even as at today, for each pension fund, there are always people trying to say, do you want to invest in this? Do you want to invest in this? But each pension fund manager has their own investment criteria, has their investment guidelines, they have their risk management team, and they will determine whether they want to invest, right? They will determine how they invest, all within the guidelines. And that continues to happen, whether it's governments engaging us, whether it's private sector, whether it's international bodies. So we continue to invest. If you see the assets splits for the pension funds as at today, about 65% invested in government bonds, about 12% invested on the stock market, about 11% invested in money market, another 11% invested in corporate debt. So pension funds will determine how they invest, So if the government has structures that they want pension funds to look into, pension funds are always open. We've always been open, and we will dissect it, we'll analyze it. I mean, it's the work they do. Every day, the pension funds are working with their analysts, with their investment teams, with their investment heads, to see how does this investment look on a case-by-case basis. They are faced with so many investments, so they need to determine and decide. And that's why it's very important that we move pension fund management to private sector managers who are dedicated and professional. Some groups want us to move it back to the public sector, but with a private sector fund manager, and which is the system that we run in Nigeria now, it depends. The individual has to be convinced that, number one, this investment is safe. Number two, it is profitable. And number three, it is liquid. Because at some point, people will retire and want to get funds. So I need to be able to sell on time. So there will be a portion that I will say I'm investing in infrastructure for long term. There'll be a portion I'll invest in liquid assets. So I think the issue, in my opinion, is a storm in a teacup. Because what we need to do is to ensure that the system and the structure is safe, is transparent, and that's what has happened. And I'll go back and applaud the people that set up the 2004 Pension Reform Act, because in there, it has all the guidelines, and the National Pension Commission, who have done a great job in regulating the system. So anyone that wants to access the pension funds, it's fine, but you need to go through the hurdles, you need to convince the people about safety, profitability, liquidity. That's very important. And the pension funds have done that over the years, and I think that will continue to happen.
All right, Mr. Aguda, let's explore further. You've mentioned what I'm about to ask in passing, but I want you to break it down to the barest minimum, to someone who is not quite literate or who doesn't understand so much of the technicalities of how these things work, because we have different heritages in terms of educational and economic heritages. But all of these people, one way or the other, contribute to the pension fund. And at the end of the day, all they want to see is that they want to access their money. So maybe in a layman's term, help us explain some of the legislative firewalls to protect and even process these pension funds. Because when they finish serving, like you see some of them, all they want is their money.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the first thing is that, the law says that your pension funds cannot be attached to any debt. So even you as an individual, if you are owing somebody and you're retired, they cannot attach those pension funds. So the pension funds are ring-fenced. That's number one. Number two, they are not taxed. So the contributions you are making into the pension funds, tax deductible. So you already get an upside. Number four is that everybody has an individual retirement savings account. So when you open your pension account, you can see your individual retirement savings accounts. And then the pension fund administrators, they determine how the pension funds are invested. So when they get to work every morning, they'll look at various options. Okay, do I invest X% of my pension funds in government bond because it's paying 20-something%? Do I place it with the bank because I can get 23%? Or do I place it in a corporate bond because I can get 18%? So they'll make that decision. And there is a process for every pension funds. They have an investment committee, they have a risk management committee, and PenCom does a job of ensuring that there's spot checks, there are annual checks, there are always checks. As a matter of fact, yesterday we had meetings with PenCom and they showed us the risk ratings of pension funds. So the National Pension Commission, as a regulator, ensures that is very well managed. So the pension fund custodians, on the other hand, are the ones that have access to the money. The pension fund administrators who decide how it's invested, they don't have access to the money. The pension fund custodian, and there are three of them, and they're subsidiaries of the three largest banks in Nigeria. First Pension Custodian, UBA Pension Custodian, and Zenith Pension Custodian. So those assets are segregated. Go ahead.
So without trying to put you on the spot, one of the calls they made that day is the fact that they want to be removed from PenCom. Is that a valid call in your assessment?
Yes. So again, like you said, different people at various levels of understanding. So even saying you want to bring for PenCom is also a misunderstanding because PenCom does not manage the funds, right? So what they want in layman's terms is that they want to go back to the public sector managed pension system, which is not funded. And I'll give an analogy, right? Imagine you have 5 children and all the children are going to school and the school is decent, they're going to school. And one of the child comes to say, you know what? I don't like the school I'm going to. I want to go abroad. I want to go to a better school. And then the dad has to make a call. If I take this child abroad, the 4 children might not go to school. So do I, just because this one has agitated and said, I want to go to another school, I increase the school fees for him and the others don't go to school. So what they are asking for is for them to be moved out of the contributory pension scheme and go back to the defined benefit scheme, whereby all their pensions is managed by the government. In order for that to happen, the government needs to set aside at least 3 trillion naira today to ensure that they will be able to meet that obligation. And we can see the NLC is fighting on labor, on minimum wage. Health workers are fighting. University workers are fighting. So the government has to make a call. Can I take a set of people out and ensure that their pensions are paid from budgetary allocations every year? Meanwhile, others are left to fend for themselves. But the government has years back tried to set a system whereby you are contributing every month, and then when you retire, those monies, in addition to the returns, will begin to pay your pensions. I think the issue really, yes, go ahead.
You can land at that point. You think the issue?
Good. So the issue really is that anywhere in the world and under any pension scheme, if your salary is not much, your pensions will not be much. Expect, when you are working, your salary is not much, and the pensions to be much. For the police, a number of them, their salaries are not much, and I know that the government is doing a lot to improve their welfare. So what needs to happen? Number one, the salaries go up, and there have been various recommendations by PenCom and the industry in what needs to be done. One of the things that could be done is perhaps the 8% that they pay on a monthly basis should be funded by the government. Right? Or when they retire, the government can take care of their gratuity. So, but taking them out of the scheme is taking us back to the dark days where pensions were managed. Public sector, it was opaque, it was prone to corruption, prone to fraud, not transparent, and they're not funded.
Well, Mr.
Right
Guda,
now, the problem is I receive my pensions every month. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and it takes me to the point. You talked about how this was sort of revolutionary, and a lot of people will attest to that. But almost 2 decades down the line now, we're faced with 2 major challenges, and I'd like you to speak to them. On the one hand is the value of what you saved vis-a-vis what you will now collect when you've retired. So imagine you were saving, or there was a deductions 10% and 8% across board. When the naira to dollar was 250, let's even say 600 naira. And then you retire at a time where naira to dollar is 1,500 naira. Or you were saving when a crate of egg was 600 naira. A crate of egg now, I've not gone to the market in a while. Bukola, help me out here.
3,800 naira.
There you go, 3,800 naira. And imagine how much, what value it will be then. So that's a major concern. How viable is it really? Because you just realize that your value is much lesser than it was when you were saving, regardless of the returns you will get. I know there will be returns, but in spite of that. On the flip side is what you even find to be the worst situation. Some employers are not even remitting at this point. The 10% they're meant to remit, they're not even remitting, and the employees do not know because they don't even get the alerts monthly. Sometimes it doesn't come, so they just think, okay, it's just network issues. So those are the 2 issues that are concerning workers, Mr. Aguda. I don't know if you can speak to them.
No, thanks a lot. Bukola, I think my wife told me eggs were 4,000. I don't know whether she was lying. You said
Maybe Bukola knows how to price eggs well.
But you mentioned two germane issues, and like you said, 20 years ago there was a revolution with the pension system whereby it was moved to the private sector. But life is about constant improvement, and those two issues are very key and germane. You're very correct in terms of the value of the assets when you retire. And so, like I said, number one, the pension contributions over the last 17 years has been about 10 trillion, and the pension funds have grown it to about 19 trillion through their investment activities. What now needs to happen is how can we insulate against devaluation? We operate in this country, and as of today, we cannot invest offshore, right, as an industry. And there's a lot of engagements with the central bank, with the government on getting a portion of that invested. And there are still conversations, and that's ongoing on the one hand. On the other hand, we continue to look for ways by which we can increase returns locally through investing in alternatives or other assets, or talking to the various exchanges to see how we can get other instruments so that when people retire, they can get decent returns. So like I said, that's the job of the pension funds. Every day, they are looking, how can I invest better? How can I get better deals for the retirement savings account holders? How can I get more returns? So that engagement will continue to happen, and we're continuing to see whether it's locally, whether it's offshore, instrument structures to continue to, and I always say PSL, profitability, safety, liquidity. So that's one area that engagement's happening. The second area on, employers not remitting, right? So there's a carrot and a stick approach, and PenOp has done a fantastic job. Over the last 10 years, they've recovered about 25 billion from employers who have not paid pensions, right? So they'll start with sending recovery agents there, and when they pay, they'll pay including a penalty. Sometimes they take them to court. So that is happening, and we'll continue to do that. But what we encourage people to do is to whistleblow. If you're working somewhere and your employer is not remitting, you whistleblow. This is the commission. If you go to National Pension Commission's website, you'll see how you can report. You can just whistleblow, and then they'll come and recovery agents for your employer. And for employers, we are also encouraging them to make those contributions because there's a benefit for them. And I always say it doesn't make sense if, as an employer, you're not remitting for your pensions for your employees, because that just means you just want to stay small. Because if you want to access the capital markets, if you want to grow internationally, you will need your pension compliance certificates. If you want to access government contracts. So for you, it makes sense. And if you want to even attract staff who are loyal, who are good staff, you need to pay your pension. So the carrot and stick approach, PenOp and the industry is doing quite a lot in ensuring that we go after those that are not paying. But also, we're also encouraging employees to whistleblow and encouraging employers to say it's in your best interest to pay your pensions. We'll always continue to strive to make the pension system better. But I hope this has tried to answer your questions.
All right, Mr. Aguda. Some of us have met, small businesses who are interested in just having corporate culture early in their businesses. They may not be conglomerates or consortium, but the basics, they just started from wherever they can, but they want to begin to have that strong corporate culture. And the question will be for them is, how can they, maybe a staff of 3-4, on board some of these staff, and what is needed for them, basically, just like asking the tax question as well, but this time pension for staff?
Yeah, you're very correct. So if you employ more than 3 people, the law says you must get on the pension plan, right? And the first thing is to contact a PFA. So the PFAs also will consult. They can consult and let you know, okay, this is the number of staff you have, and this is how much you pay. So you determine how much you pay your staff salaries. You determine how much you pay in their pensions, depending on, based on 8%. So the PFA will not impose on you, or the industry doesn't impose on you to pay X amount. The 8% is based on salary. So you have determined, based on my cash flow, this is how much I can afford. This is how much I'm going to pay them, and this is how much pension. So it's an engagement. So you determine how. So I'd like to encourage small businesses to get on the train, to engage PFAs, consult with them, and then begin to remit on a constant basis in line with your cash flow. right? I mean, nobody's going to ask you to pay more than what you have. But it just means that, if you want to grow bigger, if you're thinking, like you said, putting corporate governance in place and making your organization an organization that attracts the right kind of stuff, then you need to put these things in place, and it's within your cash flow. So I want to encourage small businesses within your cash flow. I think we're actually doing a podcast on this. If you go to our website, you'll see a podcast where it talks about small businesses and pension funds and a lot of this education. So I'd like to encourage people to go to our website and see a lot of the educational series we're doing.
Almost, thank you so much for your insight, as always, on this particular subject matter. Whenever we call on you, Mr. Oguche Aguja, the CEO of Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria, for coming through. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice talking to you always.